Today we'll talk about discourse historical approach further, and in this lecture I'll try to elaborate some important concepts about discourse historical approach. These are the concepts upon which this approach is primarily based. Among them, the most important concept is of critique. The term critical discourse analysis and its main attributes were introduced in 1980s to the world. And one of the primary goals of this approach was to introduce some kind of political critique to the discourse. Previously, the discourse analysis studies were based on some conventional linguistic analysis, which was somehow questioned by the researchers of that time, let's say Fairclough and Von Dijk. And they proposed that there should be some political aspect, some critical aspect to the analysis of discourse, in which we can analyze the overall meaning, manipulation, use and misuse of language in certain socio-political aspects. So critique somehow was introduced as a kind of critical view to the use of language in various socio-political practices. Political critique can be defined as somehow to judge the status quo of a certain social convention and discourse about that certain social convention against what can be provided as an alternative. I mean, there could be some ideal or other forms of discourse or views about a certain thing, and what is available to us in a certain or a particular discourse. So people may judge and evaluate that particular discourse in relation to other possible or ideal discourses. So critique is a kind of assessment of some kind of discourse in certain socio-political circumstances. There are three important sources of critique available to us and which are usually utilized in discourse historical approach. Among them is the critical theory of first generation, which comes to us from Adorno and Benjamin. They proposed and they discovered that language uses or discourse is manipulated for certain socio-political oppressions or manipulations, and in this way they find the use of language as oppressive and discriminatory. And through the use of language, they found that some kind of ideologies are enforced by legitimizing them after creating a certain kind of favorable discourse in for those ideologies. In this way, ideologies or certain thoughts are enforced upon a certain section of society through the use of such discourse. Another is important influence to critique in DHA is relation to Foucault. Foucault also questioned the use of discourse in many ways, especially in relation to the art of being governed in a way which is not acceptable to many people. Foucault questioned that the way we are being governed through certain ideologies or certain arts of governing, that may not be acceptable in a certain way or in another way. So he unearths various ideas or various domains in which people are usually misled by the use of certain discourses. And in this way, he challenges the naturalization of certain social relationships also. Another way to understand critique is finding its relationship with the critical theory of Habermas. Habermas also found the use of discourse or understanding of discourse challenging in many ways, and in this way he introduced or he proposed 4 validity claims in order to assess a certain discourse. Among them is the theoretical truth, expressive truthfulness, normative rightness, and comprehensibility. The first one is about theoretical truth, which may roughly be known as the ideal truth which is available to us and against which we can judge the information about a certain thing as true or false. Then expressive truthfulness, how far that truth has been conveyed to us and what kind of manipulation has been made during the process of communication of that truth. Then normative rightness, that few things may not be correct or may not be incorrect, but in certain situation they may correct or incorrect, and their truthfulness or rightness may be judged in the light of the circumstances in which they have been spoken or written or proposed, or in the light of certain norms and values in which they have been or are being accepted by a certain set of people or groups. Then comprehensibility is more communication related, that how far a truth is being conveyed in a proper manner. There may be certain hindrance of communication that might be making certain untrue thing true or certain true thing untrue. So comprehensibility is also very important, and as said, it is related to communication and language barriers. Whereas the question of truthfulness is very important. It is related to political or rhetorical manipulation of certain discourses, and it is used in various studies which discover how a certain perspective is presented in a right manner or wrong manner, or how certain views are lied about, how people speak lies in social and political discourses. So this is very important. Then we have the question of theoretical truth and normative rightness. They are central to the many critical discourse analysis studies throughout the history, especially those which fall in the domain of discourse historical approach, because truth will often be at stake in political discourses about the past. Everybody will interpret it in his or own way. For example, if you just look at the history of subcontinent, there are so many events of history which happened before the partition, and the people now living in different countries, let's say people living in Pakistan, India, and Bangladesh, they interpret those events in their own possible ways. So there is always a possibility of misinterpretation of events in the history. So that's why it is said that truth is always at stake when we interpret events in the history. And discourse historical approach always keeps a keen eye on such misinterpretations. Then we have the question of normative rightness, which is very salient in political discourses, which justify certain human actions in the past or even in the present. And we see we deal with the questions: what should be done, what could be done, what should not be done, what could have been done. So yes, when something happens and we see that this was justifiable in a particular situation or not. For example, when we study a discourse about a war, certain things which may be unacceptable in peace times would become acceptable in war times, because in situations of emergency, different kinds of discourse, analysis, norms would apply. Therefore, normative rightness is also very central to certain political and social discourses. Moving on to the inclusion of critique in discourse historical approach, we can see that discourse historical approach, within discourse historical approach, critique can be applied at all stages, even at the stage of data analysis in the beginning, where we describe the data, then at the justification as well as at the application stage, interpretation, and when we try to derive certain applications out of it, we need to include critique also. Then there are three forms of critique which are usually used in DHA: the text immanent critique, then we have the socio diagnostic critique, and then we have prospective critique. The text immanent critique is knowledge oriented. This is something which is embedded in the text. We can see with literal analysis, if not the detailed one, sometimes maybe detailed, that the things which have been written in a text or spoken in a discourse may be right or wrong. So This is very much information oriented, knowledge oriented, and with little effort we can judge that they are right or wrong. Then it can find contradictoriness of various claims made in a certain discourse. Then socio diagnostic critique is both epistemic and deontic. It is also related to knowledge, which we call epistemic, about information, and also it is deontic, which is how a certain knowledge has been conveyed. If there is some flaw in the way how knowledge has been conveyed, this could be problematic, and this may become of interest to the analyst in discourse historical approach. And this is where manipulation happens most of the times. And it also relies on social, historical, and political background of the knowledge. And this involves the critique of ideology, the critique of socio-political ethos and norms, values which prevail in a certain society at a particular period of history. Then in the end we have prospective critique, and which is embedded in the strong application of a certain analysis of an event based on discourse historical approach. This is more application oriented, and this would inform us how a certain conclusion of a study or of an analysis can be applied in a truthful or right manner in future studies or in certain socio-political spheres of action in a society.